Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev, yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. You'll find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find. That mad woman is back. The reason why I've got the giggles is because I was so surprised because we've actually got trees in the background. I thought I was going to have just green screen because it's being really weird at the moment. Don't tell anyone I said that. And thank you for being here, Wayward Bard. No worries about the lurking. That's fine. Great to have you here. And great to also have you here, Void. That's lovely. ASMR specific, your choice. Oh, you've redeemed that. That was while I was running the intro thing. I just want to get some stuff out of the way and then we'll do a little wee mini ASMR thing. Yes. First of all, let's change the keywords. I ran out of time. We had business stuff I had to do and things like that. And not because me, but because people sometimes request something specifically. You organise that, and then when they go to do their actual purchase for the said thing, they go and purchase the wrong one, and they don't think they've purchased the wrong one. And they had sent an email about it in the weekend but didn't give you enough time to actually do something about it to respond and tell them, actually, no, that one that you're looking at, that's not the one that you asked for. You actually asked for a different one to be changed. Yeah, and it wasn't even something that they needed done urgently. So hence the weird, mad lady look. On top of everything else. So first of all, let's change the keywords and then we get on to some other things. So keywords I need to type here, and we are using the following keywords, which are, just a moment, rocks. No, that's not an exclamation. We're not running are we going to run a shame bottle as well? Okay, shame. And then we're going to have... Oh, I had a whole different setup for this before. With rocks, road, and water. So so shame is on its own, okay? And then we have, after that, we have in here, we go no, that's the wrong thing. We go K word, and we also have key, I think, are the two commands. So shame is when the author shames in ways that are no longer appropriate, like something about someone being fat, and it's entirely irrelevant for the story, but they seem to feel the need to observe that this character is slow and lumbering and fat. We would use the shame command, because I have a separate water bottle for that one. This one here. And then using K word or key, I think it is, for any of those other words that are next to it. These ones here, rocks, road, or water. Whenever I read them from the story, you can use either K word or key, I think it is, to make those stand out. They will flash, they will have an animation behind them or something like that. Yeah. Something along those lines. I will actually sort out my hair in a moment. Camera is working, lights are working, microphone is working, and surprisingly, captions are working. I didn't do anything to those to make them work. I do have water bottles for keywords, so I will I'd do those as ASMR, but markers don't really make that much noise. Oh my goodness, I've got weird bits. I didn't think I had hair that long anymore. Maybe it's from over the back. What else have I got that I can do, which is ASMR? Well, that's a really good question. I could talk. I could talk Is that the way it works? Actually, I need to check what that is, what the command is for that. Sorry, there. Void. Try K-word. I know K-word is one. It should work. If it doesn't work, then there's something wrong with my streamer bot at the moment. Commands. Hi Void, great to have you here. We're going to run a tip video in just a minute, but first of all I need to sort out if this is going to work or not. I'm going to talk to you very close to the microphone, which will change the tone entirely for what it comes through for you. I don't do the fingernails tapping on the microphone or the object because I don't have long fingernails because they're a bit impractical. But let's see how we get on, shall we? Yes, that one's flashing. Yay. The other one is meant to make it... The shame works, that's good. The other one, which I thought was key... Yeah, it is key. It's meant to animate a GIF behind them. I'll see it if it works for me. Yeah, so just use K-word. It flashes the colour in the box. And shame works, yeah. So shame is very specifically for when there is something going on in the story where the author is specifically shaming a character. Or us, the reader. I was going to say the viewer, but it's not the viewer. So how are we doing so far? Kind of. How about I take out key as a keyword? Just because it doesn't seem to be working at the moment. And I'll have to see if I can get that one fixed at some stage. I'm going to write down a little note on my ASMR notepad, which is all beautifully purple. I'm going to write a little note on it to say that I need to check these things when I'm not online. No? I came across an interesting phrasing. Use shame when Grandma makes a blunder too. That wasn't very ASMR, was it? Of me. Yes, definitely use shame when I make a blunder. So I came across a phrase that intrigued me the other day. So I'm used to the term VTubers. And somebody else, and I keep on thinking, but what do we call ourselves when we are not using a replacement image, but we are on screen? And someone referred to us as 3D streamers, as opposed to flesh tubers, which sounds a little bit creepy. So that's another page off on the book, and I shall find a notepad and write this down. So I'm going to write. The reason I'm leaning in is because my microphone is usually just out of the frame. I shall write down the command I need to check, which is K. Live tubers. Oh, that's interesting. I like the sound of that. Key. GIF. Not working. I don't think I'd make a successful ASMR streamer because I'm not very good at this sort of leaning in and sounding all appealing in certain ways. Especially not with the mad hair going on. Right, let's get to a vid and I'll brush my hair.
Hello, and welcome to the stream. I'm Jev. Now, let's talk about our 6 things to enjoy the stream. Number 1, get your drink. It can be water, whatever you like, but take care of yourself and hydrate. Number 2, when I hydrate, you should as well. Did you hydrate just now? Number 2, get snacks or maybe a whole meal. It depends on your time of day and your own habits. Again, take care of yourself. Be hydrated and eat what you need to eat. Number 4, get comfy, whether it's cooler or warmer, just something to cuddle perhaps. But be comfortable. That's also important. It's good physically and mentally. Number 5, have something to write with and write on. It can be paper, it can be anything you like. Memo, post-it notes, whatever you like. This advert not associated with post-it notes in any way, shape, or form. Disclaimer. Now, sit back, listen, and enjoy. Feel free to engage in chat. Do the puzzle over here or, down there somewhere. Play Jeff Bingo. I do silly things like, I do silly things. Or you can spend pages and make me wear silly things like funny ears, like this one. Have a good stream.
And I'm back. Yes, I ran that video right as the ads were about to run, or right as they were running. I have no idea how I didn't see that, even though it did show me the timer and the colour bar and everything. Yeah, sorry about the ad. Just so you know, you don't need to tell me if there's an ad running. I can see when it's actually running, but yeah. No, you didn't miss your own reference there, Void, because that was totally not Goriki telling me about it. So I'm just trying to save some information here because someone's been urgently messaging me some information that I needed for something that wasn't working, and I don't want that to be removed before it's too late for me to get a copy of it. Right, yeah, very much shame. So let's have a drink from the shame bottle. And you guys can sit around and wait while I put labels on the other bottles because I haven't got them on them yet. So, tape, just because tape is easier to clean things off. And in my case, I use the cheapest packing tape I can get. Here's the winning lottery numbers for tonight. Advertising begins. Yes, exactly. So here you go. This is a bit of pseudo ASMR. Oh, I thought it was going to make the weird popping noise that it often makes when I try to unroll it slowly. So look, one of my new bottles. They also don't hurt my shoulder because they're not so heavy. So first of all, we shall put the tape on here. I'm not putting a blank back on them at the moment so that they are nice and neat and tidy for colouring. That didn't make sense. I'm not putting a layer of masking tape underneath it. I'm just going to put tape on and write it on with Sharpie. I will actually redo them better. That's the noise I was expecting. I will actually do them better in the future so that they are nice and readable. That might work better if I just leave it standing there on the bench instead of laying it on its side. Don't you hate it when you put tape on something and it gets wrinkles in it? Thankfully this is not like Christmas, that really thin wrapping paper. Sticky is really easy to remove, especially with warm water. One of the things I do with these is normally I put a layer of masking tape on, and that's the purple one that you've seen before. The one that's that middle tape there, that's just normal paper painter's tape, known in New Zealand as masking tape. That's what this is here. And that then has a layer of cheap packing tape over it. Cheap seems to work best for so many purposes when I'm using packing tape. And then I write on top of it with a Sharpie, more of that tape ASMR. And when I do that, I can then wipe it off using a cotton pad, like a makeup pad, but just cotton wool. Wipe that off with a cotton pad with some isopropyl alcohol in. So isopropyl alcohol is the main ingredient in rubbing alcohol, which is what a lot of people in North America buy it as. But we don't buy it as that. It's sold in the hardware store because it's used for removing things like marker. Isopropyl alcohol, that's what it's like. It's got a reasonable smell. It's not as aggressive as white spirits or acetone, which is the one that used to be in nail polish remover. So it's not as aggressive as that. It doesn't tend to soften plastics and make them go cloudy or weird. But if you use it on a cotton pad, which are in my pots under the ducks at the moment, then you can actually have it wipe that off without leaving marks. Now that tape has been put on there very, very badly, but I am going to write some words on there, so I need to write it that way, don't I? Not the other way. So the first word on here is rocks. Rocks. Trying to make it so it's readable. Very messy. Yes, I was going to do all of this beforehand and it didn't happen. But that's just life works like that. Oops, rocks has an S on the end of the word, doesn't it? Last time I checked it did. Getting there. Getting over the bumps because I didn't get the tape on straight. Rocks. You can kind of read it. That one says rocks. So that's one of them. And this one's going to say water because of the colour of it. And my pen is making no noise whatsoever. Ethanol, interesting. Yeah. It's sold in the paint department of our hardware stores. This is not even good block capitals in my style. It's very, very rough, but it'll do the job. I'll be able to see which one I'm meant to be using. So there's water. And the last one is road. Water, road. Not water, water, road. I'm trying to keep one finger along the top edge of the tape so I don't end up writing on the actual plastic of the bottle, just because I don't like doing that. I prefer to put it on the tape because then if I need to at some stage in the future use the bottle without anything on it, I can just rip the tape off and then, if necessary, remove any residue with the isopropyl alcohol, or tape sticky remover. There's some stuff sold in New Zealand which is actually based on orange oil, the oil from the skin of oranges, and you put that also on cotton pads and you let it sit on there and it soaks into the sticky from self-adhesive things like tape and things like that. And then you rub over it a little bit and the stuff just balls together and comes off. And then if you need to, you wash the surface with a little bit of detergent because of the oiliness of the orange oil. And people use it because it doesn't, there are a lot of things that the alcohol-based ones damage that the orange oil doesn't, as long as it's not something which is going to get stained by oil in some way. So that works very well. So there you go. Did it actually say on the label that it's ethanol? You must have looked it up. Yeah. Just here you go. Isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol, also known as rubbing alcohol, is a fast evaporating solvent utilized for cleaning glass, mirrors, and electronic equipment. It dissolves grease and is also useful for removing adhesive residue from sticky labels. There you go. Do not drink, etc., etc. What was I going to say? I know that North American, or at least American, rubbing alcohol has actually some other components in it as well. So this stuff here is better than rubbing alcohol for lots of things where it is used, like in crafting purposes and stuff like that, just because it doesn't leave those other residues behind, which is quite good. I think that's it for the random stuff today. I think I've remembered to... mute my tabs? Oh, great. I've just been reminded by Twitch that my streamiversary is coming up in 2 days. What's today, Monday? So that's on my Monday. So that's on my Wednesday. That up there is my date and time. My current date and time, Jev's date and time. So on the 19th is my streamiversary, which is also when, for streaming, I celebrate my birthday. Technically, my online birthday's today, but we're going to call it streamiversary birthday on Wednesday. Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, and welcome too. Haven't seen you for a while. I hope you're enjoying yourself. With me starting 2 hours earlier than I used to, we don't get to see Jonathan as much. It's probably a busy time of his workday. It's so good to see you, though. So what am I doing that's special? You get to see a couple of plushies that I've got myself as birthday presents. That's about it. Oh, thank you for that shout out for Jono too. I do appreciate that. Good to hear. Yeah. We'll help you celebrate this milestone with your viewers, so head to your creator dashboard and start party planning today. My non-Twitch user voice. That's my Twitch notification saying that I've got that coming up. I'm glad they reminded me because I didn't remember, obviously. So yay, happy birthday and streamiversary to me for 2 days' time. I probably won't do anything special for it, but thank you for being here. Some years I do, some years I don't. Good to see you. I'm always here in spirit. I've been so busy pretending to be busy. Well done. That is a good skill to have, especially in a workplace. So for those who haven't met Jonathan, he does all sorts of things. He games various games. He also reads various reads. One of the things he is working on long term, I would say is probably the best way to explain it, is his passion project is a strategy game that is based on using actual text or based around text from original documents set in the Tudor period. Lazily working on. Well, just say you're working on it long term. It's a long term project because you want to do it well, you know, that sort of thing. It's a matter of corporate rephrasing style, but just don't kill the life out of it by rephrasing. So yeah, how I first met him is I was looking for people who were doing reading, and he was reading some Tudor letters between either royal personages or people who worked under them, reading about places and descriptions of travel that they had written for journals and things like this, and they were based on source documents. He gets copies of texts that have that sort of language in it and reads them, and we were trying to decode what certain words were in it, words that were written in the language of the time that we no longer use, and they weren't easily found in dictionaries and stuff like that. And some of it was also, well, do we say it this way or do we say it that way? It seems like it's related to this word, which is currently pronounced this way, so maybe it sounds a bit like this. And he was battling his way through some of these texts, and he was very impressive, the stuff that he was doing, what he was managing to read out. I just stick with the stuff that's only been written in the last 100 years, basically. 150 years. It's more than 100 years. Because, I mean, this one here, this is not even 100 years old. It's not a really old one, but I have read some stuff from the 1800s, and I'm a wealth of knowledge and always helpful. Jev's, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I do hope I didn't come across as being a know-it-all, because that was not my intention. It's just that I know that I've read a lot of older writing, not as old as the Tudor stuff, but because these were modern books for me when I was growing up. I was reading stuff that was definitely older than this when I was growing up. I did read other books that were sort of modern as well, but because I grew up with that much older flavour to reading, it was something that just meant that there are some aspects of it. You get used to certain word usages and things like that. So between us, we were actually nutting out some of these words. It was wonderful. I'll never be ashamed of your experience. Thank you, thank you. I do appreciate that, and it is a good reminder for all of us. Exactly. So there you go, folks. Before we go further, I'm going to run another video, because we've got enough time to, just because we ran out of time on the other one. So hang on a minute. Who was it this time? We had Totally Not Goriki last time. Who was it?
Hello. My name is Raccoon Z. In Z. That's right. 3 C's and 3 O's. Ha. So, welcome to the stream. We have many tips for you to help enjoy the stream. Number 1, have a drink. I like water. As soon as my human helps me out here. So, another part of that is when I hydrate, when I take a drink, you do too. You can indicate that you've done so by giving a thumbs up or use the water bottle emoji down in chat. Number 3, sure, why not? Food or snacks? I don't have any right now, but you eat whatever you'd like to eat. Maybe it's a whole meal, maybe it's a snack, I don't know. You do you. Number 4, get comfy. You can wrap up in something. Thanks, human. That's more like it. Grab a pillow, maybe you've got a fidget toy you can play with. But do anything you like to be comfy. You could even have, I don't know, maybe your favorite human will give you scritches. Hey, human. That's right. Give me scritches. Yeah, that's right there. Yeah. No, don't touch the floof. Next, we have number 5, something to write with or write on. Hey, I can't reach the pad. There you go. And I need something to write on. I just said something to write. Oh wait, that's something to write on. I need something to write with. Okay. Okay, so I don't have opposable thumbs, but you do. Write memos down. You might need to remember something. Maybe not right now, but maybe after the stream. Number 6, get involved. Join in chat. Chat in chat. Use commands. Play bingo because, that lady says some pretty crazy things from time to time. Make clips. You can even have them featured. Maybe we can see your clips someday. Spin the pages, which are like right down there somewhere. They look like a book or something. The thing down there with a number under chat. And just do whatever you can to enjoy chat. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, so we've got the giggles today. It's just one of those days. So I'm just going to disguise my drink because they are not sponsoring me. Therefore, they don't deserve to be seen on screen. Pretty good for a temporary setup. I had the joys of discovering what the inside of a... Let's find one that's suitable. Yes, of a Nido. You can't see me either. I hadn't realised it was that green. Of a Nido fidget ball is like. So this one? Yes, you can see that one. You can't see the splash around it, but you can see that. So one of these fidget balls, one of these squish balls that have textured stuff inside them, and they're very satisfying to play with because they bounce back, but they're not instant. Unlike some of the other ones that are around, I had the pleasure of discovering what the inside of one is like this morning because the rubbery outer on it had perished. Well, had split, perished in one place. So, they've got some slower squishes like the gumdrop one and the cube, but the cats and the glow-in-the-dark one and the groovy glob, yeah. So this white blob here, it feels hard rubbery. In other places it felt like, look, see, it's been leaking. It felt like set PVA glue, white glue. You can't see it at all. I didn't realise the colour. Whoop, I'm squirting water out of it now. I better not do that. I'm just going to turn off my green screen for a minute. Where's my camera? Camera. Stream cam. Turn off this just because I'm finding it so amusing. Chroma key, turn it off. So this thing here is what I'm doing. And that's the plug where they seal it at the bottom. It's just an extra thick bit of silicone rubber. And then this bit here around where the name is, let's put it the right way up, is the bit where it cracked, it perished. I have cleaned it out inside, which is why you can see, which is why it is compressing, because it's got nothing in it left except a little tiny bit of water which squirted out on my desk. So you can see there's a hole in it. And it had been leaking out of that hole. And what I did was PJ and I we went and had a look at it in the laundry, and I squirted it out into the tub, and it came out like piping icing or whipped cream from a piping bag. So I'm keeping that in there just as a reminder. Whipped cream from a piping bag or something like that, but with a slightly foamy, almost gritty texture, like some of the other things you do piping with when you're cooking. Like if you've ever made red velvet cupcakes and piped on top of it the icing stuff that they recommend in the packet mix, it's kind of got that sort of a creamy, almost foamy, slightly particulate texture to it, and it was like that. And I wasn't worried about it being toxic because they're non-toxic. Because they're sold for kids to play with. They're non-toxic. They don't recommend eating this stuff, definitely not, but they're not toxic, so I wasn't worried about that. And then we washed it all down the sink and cleaned the thing out. So yeah, that was my exploration today. I don't know what's inside the slow squish ones, like the cube. I'll get the cube out. They've got another one like this, which is a gemstone, and I think the gem also is the slow squish like this, but it's also got, large sparkly bits in it like sequins. Right, so this is the Nido Nice Cube, of course, in purple. You can only get it in 3 colours, I think. There's pink and blue. But this is a slow squish, so you can't go squish the same way and have it push sideways out, because it's a totally different mixture that they use in it. And this is in warmer weather, so it is a little bit more supple than it would be otherwise, but that's actually a very satisfying squeeze. And then the gumdrop one has a texture. Try and get, yeah, you can just see the texture on it, like gumdrops have. The ones which have the little bobbly bits on, which we would call hundreds and thousands, because we're in New Zealand and that's what we call those sort of things. Not the long rod type sprinkles, but the little round sprinkles that are semi-spherical, sort of spherical, not hemispherical, because they're not a half dome, but semi as in kind of, trying to be. Right, those can go over there in a stack, and hopefully they won't land on top of me. That was how I found out about it. One of the stacks fell over, and I had a look and I went, oh, there's something white coming out of that one. It turns out that was that blob that you saw. Right, so there you go, and we are going to read The Secret of the Caves by Franklin W. Dixon. So, oh, bother. I've just got to close this because it's not doing what it's meant to. And I'm going to open it again. This is my chat monitor. Some things are extra slow today. I don't know if it's because of the solar flares or solar storms that are happening at the moment just being disruptive, or if it's actually just our internet being weird. We had a power cut in the middle of the night it wasn't a scheduled one. PJ and I did see some orange flashing lights up the road from like an emergency vehicle, but not police or ambulance or fire brigade, because they use red and blues, or just red. But these ones were orange ones, which tend to be working, like service vehicles and things like that, where they have right to notify you that's an emergency, like road working crews and stuff like that. But there wasn't any of that going on either. So quite possibly a house was being moved and it ran into a overhead power line. Maybe. I don't know. No idea. Oh, now I need coffee again and I have to wrap it up. Let's see if I can get this done in such a way that it's not going to be a faff to pick it up every time. Wrap it up for the day. That'll kind of work. Now I'm going to read. Don't interrupt. So we are going to read the Franklin of the Caves by Secret W. Dixon. And we're starting at chapter 1, which is called Overboard. There is one illustration shown in this book, but it's shown a long way through it, about halfway through, and I don't know if it's relevant to the part of the book that it's in, because they don't always do that. Usually these ones, they do them as a frontispiece, so I don't know why it's there. There isn't a frontispiece here. So chapter 1, Overboard. Well, the stealing of autos in this neighbourhood has come to an end, Frank. I wonder if anybody will ever take to stealing motorboats. Don't ask for it. Yeah, I think the last story we had was one where there were boats being stolen. I can't remember, it's a while ago, because I try not to read these too often, because we need to let them build up some more of them available for us, because we're going to get to the stage where they only release one a year to public domain. So here we go. Perhaps, Joe, but there isn't the chance to steal a boat that stolen boats cross over with Tom Swift. Yeah, it does feel like it, doesn't it? Perhaps, Joe, but there isn't the chance to steal a boat that there was to steal cars. Oh, that's right. Sorry, it was stealing boats. The last story we had about the Hardy Boys was about cars being stolen, not boats. Tom Swift was the book about boats being stolen because there was something hidden in one. It was a specific boat they were looking for. But I mixed up what I was saying before. Gee, now that the excitement's over, I wonder what will come up next, because these stories are written back to back in terms of the timeline that they take place over. I don't know, but something's bound to happen sooner or later. It always does. Hope it comes soon. I don't want to get rusty. It was a Saturday afternoon in June, one of those warm, drowsy days when even the leaves of the trees seem too indolent to stir. There was scarcely a ripple on the surface of the water, no movement but the flow of the incoming tide. Three motorboats circled lazily on the surface of the water, no movement but the flow of the incoming tide. I picked up on that. Water. Here we go. On the surface of the water. This one doesn't have a button. I've just got to... Okay. I just splashed myself because I didn't wipe it down properly after I filled it up. I was in a hurry. You guys had the intro screens? You know, the whole 15-minute countdown? I was rushing around filling up water bottles. Here we go. Water. Water. So I need to put the name down the side, not down the outside edge. Right, that's there. Put that there. When the Keywaters Water PJ gets you a water buster. If I had a waterproof workstation area and desk, maybe. Shh, please do not suggest. Oh dear. The three motorboats circled lazily about in Barmet Bay within sight of the city of Bayport. The lazy spirit of the afternoon seemed to have spread to the occupants of the boats. I'm just checking to see that boats isn't one of our words, for they lounged about in comfortable attitudes. Biff Hooper, in his craft, the Envoy, had devised a way of steering with his foot while sprawled on the side cushions. I should have a picture of these guys or the style of boats. I used to have one for a background. I will try and get that done. I'm going to put that on my list of things to do. Background. So that's that one. This note is background. Barmet Bay ? Because it is a made-up place. We'll carry on. Because I'm pretty sure the boat's going to play a little bit more of a part in this one. Just because, yeah, caves in the title. And then that picture there. It looks like they're hiding behind a rock. There's the tide. And then there's someone coming out of the cave, and I think he's shaking his fist at them. Biff Hooper and his craft, the Envoy, had devised a way of steering with his foot while sprawled on the side cushions. In a motorboat close by, the Napoli, sat Tony Preto, whose dark hair, olive skin and sparkling eyes indicated his Italian parentage even more emphatically than his name. Yeah, because we have to know what nationality somebody has come from. Because the old days... If you were not Native American, you came from somewhere else. Scotland, England, Wales, France, Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Estonia, Russia, Israel, lots of other countries. I can't think of all the names. So, yeah. Greece. I don't know what nationality the boys were originally meant to have come from. But apparently they weren't Italian, otherwise we wouldn't be told that Tony Preto is Italian. 26-foot, 1929 minute Shields runabout was like the Nike speedboat of its day. Yeah, I wondered if, Goriki has sent me a picture of a speedboat. That's the style that I was looking for when I was looking for boats to put in the background on previous ones. So I might actually save that and put that up as a background picture at some stage, or something else from that style and that era. Very different. Oh, that's cool. 39-foot version. I'm sorry, he's just sending me boat pictures, motorboat pictures. I'm a sailing boat person, but these motorboats are delicious. Seriously, they are delicious. I'm sorry, they just are. We're going to have to put some more. There may be some up in the Hardy Boys, some other pictures of that era of boats, but early pictures of them in the Hardy Boys channel over in the Discord server. I don't know. Anyway, let's carry on reading. But I will try and put those up at some stage, or maybe use them in the background, or just show them occasionally the next time when I get organised. Right. I'll stop ranting about people being told about where people come from. In the third craft were two lads who need no introduction to readers of previous volumes in the series, as neither do either of the previous people we've had introduced. By the way, Mr. Author, the boy at the wheel, a tall, dark, handsome lad about 16, was Frank Hardy, and the other, a fair, curly-headed fellow about a year his junior, was his brother Joe. These boys were the sons of Fenton Hardy, an internationally famous private detective who lived in Bayport. "I didn't expect to see you fellows out on the bay this afternoon," shouted Biff Hooper, raising his head over the side of his boat. "Where did you think we'd be?" called back Frank. "Up in the attic, studying?" "Thought you'd be out in your car," and Biff grinned widely. There was a laugh from Tony, and the Hardy Boys also laughed with great good humour. Their car was a standing joke among their chums. Just as well we're not doing chums. Remember that book we read where we had chums was our keyword? I think we only had the one keyword. And I think we were all sloshing by the time we got to the end of the book. There were people running off to go to the loo, but not in ad breaks or to refill their water bottles and go to the loo, just because there was so much use of that one particular word. Oh my goodness. And it was chums. Sorry. Their car was a standing joke among their chums. Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that link. That's really appreciated there, Goriki. Their car was a standing joke among their chums, and as Chet Morton put it, standing joke described it exactly, for it seldom moved. "Never mind," returned Joe. "That old car served its purpose anyway. We used it only as bait." Oh, yeah, I remember that. They did too. They got it. It was something that looked like it was going to be good, but it didn't run particularly well, and it was so they could catch these guys who were stealing cars. "It was mighty good bait," said Tony. "You caught some big fish with that old crate." "It has earned its keep," Frank called back. "We're going to put it on a pension and let it stay in our garage for the rest of its life without charge." The boys were referring to a roadster that the Hardy lads had purchased out of their savings some time previously. It was a car that proved the old axiom that beauty is only skin deep, for although it glittered with nickel and paint, we would now say chrome. They used to coat with nickel, now they coat with chrome for the shiny bits, the silvery bits on vehicles. With nickel and paint, and although its lines were trim and smooth, its inner workings were utterly beyond comprehension, the comprehension of Bayport mechanics. For a few weeks after its purchase, the car ran eccentrically enough, but it still ran. Then one day, for no apparent reason, it gave up the ghost, and no amount of tinkering would prompt it even to move out of the garage. Now, keep in mind, cars were around at this stage, but they had not been standardized at this stage of storytelling and real life. So there were a lot of alternative systems used. A lot of car manufacturers were coming up with different ways of doing things. Somebody I know actually has a vintage car, It's not one that's worth a lot because the ones in New Zealand aren't. They had actually sold their previous one and got this one because this one was good and reliable and things like that. But their previous ones, one of their previous ones had an alternative system on something. Something to do with one of the drive mechanisms. And so it functioned completely differently to what we would expect for a modern car. Now, driving a vintage car is different. They just are. The use of synchromesh was fairly new. That's where you can go from one gear into the next. And that was actually, no. They didn't have it at that stage. So, you know, if you are driving a manual car, not an automatic, it doesn't apply to automatics. They weren't around back then. If you're driving a manual car and you change gears, you push the clutch in with your foot, you push the gear lever through the midpoint, which is neutral, and then into the next gear that you want to use. Now, if you're changing up gears, there's no issue there, but when you're changing down in a vintage car, you actually have to double declutch, which means you go from your highest speed gear, you push the clutch in with your foot, you pull the gear lever down into neutral, you take your foot off the clutch, and that actually means that the clutch plates re-engage, and then you push your foot on the clutch again because that stops the spinning, the free spinning, and then you push your foot on the clutch again, and then you pull the gear lever down into the slower gear speed again. And what it does is it slows down the spin of those bits so the cogs will intermesh correctly, and you go from one cog into another. So you have one that's holding, and then you go through to another one. And it means that it gets them so they're working at a similar enough speed that you're not going to break teeth off the gears. That's effectively what it does. So you have to double declutch when you're going from a higher gear down to a lower gear. Whereas a modern car, you have synchromesh, which takes care of all that for you. You just put your foot on your clutch, you push your gear lever or pull your gear lever in the right direction for the gearbox, the gear that you're moving to, and then you take your foot off your clutch and you don't even think about it. It just works. And then if you're an automatic driver, you don't even think about that. You just put your foot down or take your foot off the accelerator and use the brake when you need to. So yeah, it does make a big difference. There is a lot of development over the years, but back at this stage, there was still a lot of experimental stuff going on with vehicles, with brake systems, with steering systems, with clutch and gear systems, all sorts of things. I've been with this relative when we've been driving places, and they've been talking about all sorts of issues with one of the alternative ways that something was working or was meant to work. And so when they needed to get the vehicle serviced because it was something that they couldn't work on themselves, they had to find somebody who has worked with cars that old and actually understands that particular mechanism, which is unique to that brand of cars from that particular era. There was a certain time period that company was making that mechanism and using it in their cars. And it would be that specific, which is why these boys couldn't get something fixed in their car, because it wasn't a common car type. That was why they got it, is because it looked flash and fancy and it wasn't commonly around. So not everybody would know that there are issues with it if you don't know how to work it. So yeah. Anyway, so there you go. There's a lot of that sort of stuff involved around this era. So this is probably a big part of why this car couldn't be got to work properly, even when they did take it to the local mechanics. Not that you needed to know that, but yeah, I'm sorry. My brain got overwhelmed with that information, so I just had to get it out there so I could carry on reading. So let's read. So no amount of tinkering would prompt it even to move out of the garage. However, and we couldn't get they couldn't get manuals back then like we can now either. However, as Joe had said, the car had served its purpose. The boys had picked it up cheaply with a definite object in view. As told in the preceding volume of this series, The Hardy Boys' The Shore Road Mystery, there had been a series of mysterious automobile thefts on the Shore Road leading out of Bayport, numerous pleasure cars and trucks having been stolen, and no amount of investigation on the part of the police had succeeded in revealing their whereabouts or the identity of the thieves. Frank and Joe Hardy, who had earned considerable local fame in their amateur activities as amateur detectives in emulation of their famous father, had decided to lay a trap. Thank you very, very much for that trivia. I do appreciate it. Oh, that's interesting. I'll try and remember to mention that when I get to the end of the chapter, because it's not specific to the little bit that I'm currently reading. Oh, I just saw a notification from Twitch. Pre-roll ads are currently disengaged for the next 59 minutes. That's because I'm running ads normally on a schedule. It didn't used to tell me that. And it's in a different colour pop-up. Or pop down. Anyway, carrying on. And then when we get to the end of the chapter, I'll read that little bit of information out because it is actually relevant for the series. So they had decided to lay a trap for the automobile thieves, and buying the gorgeous rattle trap, parked it on the Shore Road for several nights, concealing themselves in the rear. After many adventures, the Hardy Boys captured the thieves and recovered the stolen cars. They collected several handsome rewards for their work, so their investment in the Roadster proved exceedingly profitable after all. Now, a Roadster is like a sports car. Now, the car owners around Bayport have sure been breathing easier since that affair was cleared up, said Biff. I don't think there'll be any more car thieving for a long time, Tony declared. The two sleuths here put a stop to that. We had a good time doing it, Frank admitted. I'm rather sorry it's all over. Never satisfied, commented Biff. He prodded the wheel with his foot and the Envoy swung about with its nose pointing down the bay. Barmet Bay, 3 miles long, opened on the Atlantic, and in the distance the boys could see a motor yacht that ran daily between Bayport and one of the towns on the coast, a trim little passenger craft that was proceeding toward them at a fast clip. Sorry, I've got an itchy spot on my arm and I just took a scab off, so I'm probably about to bleed. It happens. Where are you going? Shouted Tony. Out to meet the passenger boat. Race ya! So will we, called Frank. Biff abandoned his indolent posture. Oh, it's obviously the latest word for this author. And settled down to take advantage of his head start. His boat leapt ahead with a roar. Tony Preto had to make a half-turn before he could get underway. The Hardy Boys were similarly unprepared, but they had no doubt of the ability of the sleuth to overhaul Biff's boat quickly. Their craft was one of the speediest in the bay, with smooth lines and a powerful engine. They had trouble on the turn, for the swells of the other boats caught the sleuth and put it off its course, and by the time the craft was nosing in pursuit, Biff Hooper had a good lead, and Tony Preto was also ahead of them. Step on it, said Joe. Frank stepped on it, which is not the way you do it on a boat, but that's all right, and the sleuth began eating up the intervening distance, rocking and swaying, prow well out of the water. That means the bow was up. Prow, bow, it's the same thing. The boat overhauled the Napoli, and Frank grinned at Tony as they crept by. The Italian lad was getting every ounce of speed of which his engine was capable, and although he jockeyed to try to put the Hardy Boys off the course, they sped on and soon left him behind. Biff had been tinkering with the engine of his craft, and had evidently made a few improvements, for the Envoy was going along at a clip it had never before achieved. Oh my goodness! Looks as if he intends to put one over on us, muttered Frank, as he opened up the engine to the last notch. He'll beat us to the boat at this rate. The motor yacht was about a mile away. And yacht has all sorts of different meanings, so we're not going to go into that here. On through the water plunged the sleuth, gaining slowly but surely on the craft ahead. Once in a while Biff cast a hasty glance backwards to wave mockingly at them. He misjudged an approaching wave on one of these occasions, and the Envoy swerved. He lost valuable seconds, righting the craft to its course again, and the sleuth gained. The yacht was about a quarter of a mile distant when the sleuth at last pulled up beside the other boat. Inch by inch it forged ahead until the bow of each boat was on a line with the other. Then the sleuth's greater speed became manifest as it pulled away, leaving Biff shaking his head in exasperation. Suddenly Joe, who had been looking at the passenger yacht in the distance, gave a shout of alarm. "Look!" he cried. Frank glanced up just in time to see an immense puff of black smoke bursting from above the deck of the yacht. Then across the waves was borne to their ears the roar of an explosion. They could see figures running about on the deck of the boat. One of them, a woman, ran directly to the rail and began to clamber up on it. "What on earth?" gasped Joe. "She's going overboard." Another figure ran out, making a frantic grab at the woman, who was balanced perilously on the top of the rail. Then, her arms outspread, the woman jumped. The boys saw her plunge down the side of the yacht, and there was a splash as she hurtled into the water. A moment later she emerged, and they could see her swimming about and waving her arms. The sleuth had drawn closer to the yacht in the meantime, and now the boys could hear a faint cry for help. Tensely, Frank leaned over the wheel. So he's leaning over the wheel to make it go faster. Great clouds of smoke were pouring from the yacht. "We'll have to rescue her," he said. "It's her only chance." The yacht had passed the woman by now, and although a lifebuoy had been flung out, it was some distance away from her, hampered by her wet clothes. Yes, dresses, especially ones which have lots of petticoats and stuff like that, are terrible when you're in the water. Hampered by her wet clothes, the woman was making no progress towards it. Slowly the yacht began to circle, but the lads saw that it would never reach her in time. The sleuth ploughed on through the waves. The boys saw the woman throw up her hands with a despairing gesture and disappear beneath the surface. And that's the end of the chapter. Cliffhanger ending, right? We'll get back to that in a minute. So I'm just going to read some notes here. Goriki has shared a link with me for the Biscayne Bay Regatta. Miami sets a fast pace. That's from Hydroplane History website. So that's featuring details such as links of boats and speed divisions and stuff like that. And it's about the sort of boats that you see. I'm going to see if I can show this to you just a part. Unplug that for now. See if I can get that cable to stay. Yes. So these sort of boats. These are modern photos of these sort of boats. I don't know if these ones are modern builds of old boats, but you can actually still find these designs, similar designs available. They are stunning, and they're often partly painted and partly varnished, so you can see the wood through the protective coating, and they look amazing. And then just an extra, which is a bit of information about the Hardy Boys books in general. Those are 2 original boats. Oh, stunning. I did wonder. They've got that line. Often when people build something modern, they want to just adjust it slightly, and it doesn't quite have the same, ooh, yes, it's right feel to it. But there are modern recreations, yes. And Goriki follows one of those makers. Some of them are excellent. They are perfectly scaled. They might not be exactly the same original size, but they have expanded or contracted the size correctly in a way that works. And then you get some people are sort of like, they want that style, but they're just modernizing it, and the modernizing is more important, and they don't quite catch at those ones, sadly. One maker does recreations as electric vessels. Wonderful. So good to hear. Oh, lovely. They really are stunning. They hydroplane well, which means that they get so they're going fast enough that they break the surface tension of the water and they skim across the top of it, and it means that they can go faster than a boat that sits in the water does. And it's amazing how fast they can go. That's the boats that you see for speed records and stuff like that usually have those sort of properties about them. But the style on that era of boats is really quite stunning. So there's other bit of information that he's also found, which is to do with the Hardy Boys and the release sequence of the books, because most Stratemeyer Syndicate books, they will release the first release they do of books in a new series, they will do 3 books usually. Sometimes they'll do 5 the first year. They'll have them all come out at once, so that they put a little bit of extra investment in those first books just to get them all out at once, so that they can actually feel the waters and see if there are going to be enough people who are interested to make it worth doing a continuing series from those. I don't know how many they actually started off with their 3 or 5 book release and then decided they weren't going to do any more. There are possibly some like that, but those are definitely ones that are not likely to have been reprinted at any stage. But then what they have generally done is they do 1 new book a year or 2 new books a year in the series. The Hardy Boys, they didn't. They did it slightly differently. So they did start with a 3-book release year, and I think they did that the first 2 years. I'm not sure, but this is the information. By October 1929, it was the Great Depression, Wall Street market crash, and it's why there are only 2 Hardy Boys books released in 1929. So this is one of those, and instead of the 3, and why in 1930 there is only 1 Hardy Boys book. This coincidentally also led to the releases from 1930 and on only being 1 book per year for the most part until 1980. Yeah, I think they found that by that stage there was enough interest that people would buy them because they were something familiar, so they didn't have to try and do a huge market batch each time. There was a stable interest that was going forwards because they'd found it from the market influences at the time with not having enough money around. People were not buying as often and things like that, but they would still buy, maybe just not quite as often. And so they actually did get into this habit of after the initial release of 3 books in the first year, or maybe 5, there were 1 or 2 series where they did 5 books in the very first year. After that, dropping to every series they did later on. They'd start with the first year with the bundle release, and then they would go to 1 book per year. And that apparently this is where they learnt it and why they learnt it. Because, yeah, people would still buy, but not on the same big rates that they had been previously. Because books are not cheap. We understand that. People who write books do, generally speaking. Not all of them, but most of them do. So thank you for finding that. That's really, really appreciated, Goriki. It's interesting information to actually understand how the economic climate affects what we get to read as light entertainment at some stage. And how they came into being. And I am going to have another drink. I hope you've got something yummy to drink. Here we go. Chapter 2, The Rescue. As the Hardy Boys sped toward the woman who appeared above the surface again in a moment and began to struggle wildly, they saw that confusion prevailed on board the yacht. Great clouds of smoke were pouring from amidship. That means in the middle of the boat, amidship. People were running frantically about the deck. Efforts were being made to lower a lifeboat, but apparently something went wrong, for it sagged perilously and then stuck, with 2 sailors working hastily to release it. But the boys' immediate concern was the woman. She disappeared beneath the water again, and they were fearful that she'd gone under for the last time. The whole thing about the 3rd time you go under is the time that you drown. No, that's just... People like patterns, and so we make patterns of information. But the boys' immediate concern was the woman. She disappeared beneath the water again, and they were fearful that she had gone under for the last time. Then, as the sleuth surged forward, they saw her emerge once more. They were close enough now to see her frightened face, and as the sleuth sped within a few yards of her, Joe poised himself and dived. Yes, they've grown up living next to the sea, and so therefore they're reasonably competent swimmers, and they're also quite athletic in their own way, so that they go hand in hand. He plunged into the water just as the woman was going down for the 3rd time, which back in the day would be considered very, very dangerous, because on the 3rd time you don't come back up again. Doesn't always work like that. He kept cool and, remembering the first aid instruction he had received, took care not to come within reach of the wildly clutching hands. I was at school in the day when they used to teach us this stuff about how to rescue someone who's drowning. Because I live in an island nation and most people live within 50 miles of the coast. And so, yeah, and I mean, I live on the coast, and so it just makes sense to learn how to treat the water with respect, but also how to look after other people who might need it. Right. Took care not to come within reach of the wildly clutching hands. He grasped the woman by the hair, and then, keeping behind her, managed to get a grip that did not endanger himself. Had she been able to throw her arms about him, he would have been dragged beneath the surface with her. Yes, because people grab hold and hold close, and if that other person is sinking, the one who's doing the grabbing, then you don't have the movement available to you to be able to stay afloat the same way. Joe struggled toward the sleuth. It had sped past when he dived, but Frank had quickly brought the craft around, and Joe had to swim but a few strokes. Frank throttled down the engine, and he was able to give a hand in assisting the woman on board. She was dragged into the boat, dripping and almost unconscious, and Joe clung to the gunwale until Frank grasped his shoulders and hauled him over the side, because it really is quite strenuous when you're trying to rescue somebody. You're trying to keep their head above water as well as your own. You're having to do all the swimming for the both of you, as well as dealing with someone who's struggling the whole time because they feel like life is departing. In the meantime, the Hardy Boys' chums were speeding toward the yacht. The race was forgotten. They were still speeding towards the yacht, which had been the destination, but they're no longer racing. Frank and Joe did their best to revive the half-conscious woman. Her immersion in the water and the shock of being face-to-face with death, face-to-face with death had left her weakened, and she was moaning and murmuring as she lay on the cushions. Joe gave what first aid he could, moving her arms back and forth to restore circulation, while Frank set the course of the sleuth in the direction of the yacht. Biff Hooper had already reached the passenger boat. He drew up alongside with Tony Preto and the envoy, not far behind. Passengers were crowding to the rail, some shouting and screaming with fright, some pleading to be taken off. Biff and Tony were ready to offer their boats for this purpose, but they noticed that the cloud of smoke had diminished in volume. A uniformed man was bellowing through a megaphone. "No danger," he roared. The fire is under control. No danger." But it was plain that many in the crowd were afraid that there would be another explosion. "Take us off," screeched a wild-eyed woman. "Take us off before the boat blows up." She scrambled up on the rail, but the uniformed man seized her and prevented her from trying to leap overboard. "Need any help?" shouted Biff. "Stand by for a while," returned the officer. "We're getting this fire under control, but we don't know how bad it is." Biff and Tony and their motorboats cruised in the neighbourhood of the yacht as the ship's officer asked. The passengers were milling about on the deck, badly frightened, but gradually they became calmer as a attendant assured them that there was no danger. The heavy cloud of smoke decreased in volume. The boat's crew was small and the firefighting equipment was limited, but in a little while it became evident that the blaze was not as bad as it had seemed, and that it had indeed been checked in time. Soon the smoke cloud ceased rolling up from below. The uniformed man came on deck again with a megaphone. He raised it to his lips and bellowed, "Thanks, boys, but we won't need you." "That's fine," shouted Tony in reply. "Fire all out?" "Tin of gasoline exploded. It didn't spread much. We'll be able to make Bayport under our own power." "Righto," called Biff. "We're going in now. Anyway, if you need us, give us a hail." "We'll do that." You don't usually use so many words when you're using a loud hailer across water, because even if it's loud enough, the words jumble up on their way. The motorboats circled away. In the distance, Biff and Tony could see the Hardy Boys in the sleuth with the woman they had rescued. "Your passenger is all right," shouted Biff to the captain. "Our chums will bring her back with them." He turned the nose of his craft toward the sleuth. The Hardy boys were doing their best to revive the woman they had rescued from the waves. She was not unconscious, but she seemed very weak and scarcely appeared to realise where she was. She was an elderly woman, dressed in black, and although her immersion in the water had undoubtedly been a tremendous shock, the boys could see that she was of an exceedingly nervous temperament, and evidently not in the best of health, for she was worn and pale. "Where am I?" she moaned. "Where am I now?" "You're quite safe," Frank assured her. "You're in a motorboat." "You saved me." "We got you out of the water just in time." "I want to go to Bayport," said the woman weakly. "We'll take you there," promised Joe. "It isn't very far away. We'll take you there at once." "I want to go to Bayport," she repeated. "It's important. I have to see someone there." "Head the boat around, Frank," said Joe quietly. He'd seen their chums returning from the neighbourhood of the yacht, so he realised that there was no further danger from the fire. "I must be in Bayport tonight," gasped the woman. "I must go there to see Fenton Hardy, the detective." Then she collapsed weakly, her eyes closed, and she was a dead weight in Joe's arms. She had fainted. The Hardy boys looked at one another in astonishment. "She wants to see Dad," said Frank incredulously. It was a strange coincidence that they, of all people, should have rescued her when she was on her way to see their father. Such a strange coincidence that happens all the time in kids' books and adults' books. Fenton Hardy had many clients, some of whom came long distances to consult him. He was one of the greatest private detectives in the country, and his fame was widespread. He had been for many years on the New York force, that's the police force, and had finally achieved his ambition of setting up an agency of his own. He'd moved to Bayport on the Atlantic coast with his family. Gorihi is affirming Chet. Gorihi says that Chet is a celestial puppy. And his family and their success had been immediate. He had successfully handled many difficult cases, and his services were much in demand. Frank and Joe Hardy, his sons, were anxious to follow in their father's footsteps, in spite of his objections, and in spite of their mother's desire that they prepare themselves for medicine and law, respectively. But the boys had a natural deductive bent, and they had taken several local cases of their own initiative, succeeding so well that Fenton Hardy had finally withdrawn his objections and agreed that if, when they were of age, they still desired to become private investigators, he would not stand in their way. The Hardy boys were introduced in the first volume of this series, entitled The Hardy Boys, The Tower Treasure, wherein they handled their first case of any consequence. A large quantity of bonds and jewels had been stolen from an old mansion on the outskirts of Bayport, and after numerous adventures the lads traced the loot and ran the criminal to earth. Other volumes of the series have recounted their adventures in handling other cases that came their way, all of which they successfully solved. In the volume immediately preceding the present book, entitled The Hardy Boys, The Shore Road Mystery, the lads, as already mentioned, rounded up a gang of automobile thieves who had stolen a number of cars and trucks from points along the shore road above Barmet Bay. After that, things had been quiet around Bayport, and the boys were beginning to think that mysteries were at a discount. "We'd better get her back to Bayport right away," said Joe, as he looked down at the unconscious woman. "She may be dying." "Splash some water on her face. She's just fainted, I think." "She's just come out of the sea. Why would she need more water?" "Sorry." Joe rendered impromptu aid, but the woman was in a dead faint, and he could not revive her at all. In the meantime, the motorboat was heading back in the direction of the city. Frank had let her out to the utmost. Let her out, like, opened up the throttle. They're going as fast as they can. Frank had let her out to the utmost, and the speedy craft was eating up the distance. He crouched tensely at the wheel, and sheets of spray splashed over the bow. "I wonder what on earth she wants to see Dad about," he said to himself. Then he chuckled. "Dad will have to thank us for saving one of his clients." And that's the end of the chapter. So just a moment. Excuse me a moment. It's carrying on now. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, Miss Todd. Frank Hardy lost no time on the run back to Bayport. Instead of proceeding directly to the boathouse, he docked the sleuth at one of the city wharves. There the lads were fortunate enough to find a taxi. The woman was still unconscious when they arrived, so with the assistance of the taxi driver, they lifted her out of the boat and into the car. Frank instructed the man to drive to the office of a doctor they knew well, and there the woman received attention. Yay! They're not taking her straight home, they're taking her to medical assistance. I was hoping they weren't going to take her straight home. And there the woman received attention. That she has evidently been under a great strain, the doctor told them. The shock of the explosion and her struggle in the water were just the finishing touches. Under his expert administrations, the woman was soon revived sufficiently to sit up, probably smelling salts. They make you sort of like startle awake. Apparently sports people use them thinking that they're actually helping them to think better. No, they just make you breathe more deeply and startle you awake if you're unconscious. She was under his expert administrations. The woman was soon revived sufficiently to sit up. She looked about her. What happened? She asked weakly. You are in good hands, madam, the doctor assured her. Just be quiet for a while and you will be all right. In a few minutes the woman had recovered. First of all, she insisted on thanking the boys for rescuing her. If it hadn't been for these brave lads, I would have been drowned. It was foolish of me to jump off that yacht, but I have been very nervous lately, and when I heard the explosion and saw all that smoke, I lost my head completely. Well, said the doctor genially, there's been no harm done. You were on your way to Bayport, weren't you, and here you are. Am I in Bayport now? Yes, you must take me to Fenton Hardy at once, please, said the woman, sitting up. I must see him. There'll be no trouble about that. These boys are Fenton Hardy's sons. The woman gazed at the Hardy boys in surprise. His sons? She exclaimed. Fenton Hardy is our father, stated Frank, just in case she didn't understand what that meant. His sons? He's our father. Duh. No, he's our mother. What? Mother or father? They were still going to be the sons. I don't know why Frank needed to say that. It's daft. The woman was evidently astonished. Isn't that strange to think that your father should be the very man I was coming to see? Madam, did you not know that you were in a Hardy Boys mystery? Naturally, the one boat that is going to rescue you will be peopled and crewed by those of that family name. He's at home right now, said Joe. As soon as you're feeling well enough, we'll take you there. That will be good of you. I came to Bayport for the sole purpose of seeing your father. Are you coming to visit us? Asked Joe. The woman shook her head. No, I want to see your father on business. Important business. It is private, so I'm afraid I can't tell you any more about it. The boys forbore to question her. Yea. I suppose I should tell you my name. I am Miss Evangeline Todd. They bowed in acknowledgement. It doesn't mean anything to them so far, because it doesn't mean anything to me. Will you take me to your father now? I feel much better. I am very anxious to see him at once. There is no time to lose. And she speaks like this because she is described as being an older woman, maybe even elderly. Yes, indeed. Miss Todd seemed to be quite agitated, and although the lads felt that a few minutes more or less would make no particular difference, they decided that it would be best to humour her. Miss Todd got to her feet, and although she was still physically weak, she evidently had a mind of her own, for she was determined to remain no longer in the doctor's office when she was so near her goal. Accordingly, the Hardy boys helped her out of the office to the waiting taxi. During the brief drive, she repeatedly expressed her astonishment at having been rescued by the Hardy boys, of all people. "I've often heard of you boys," she said. "You often help your father, don't you?" "Whenever we can," laughed Frank. "Well, I hope you can help him now. I want to learn the truth about poor Toddham." The lads waited expectantly, but the elderly lady said no more about the object of her call. She seemed somewhat eccentric and muttered to herself a great deal. "Poor Toddham," she repeated over and over again. "I do hope Mr. Hardy can help me. It's all very strange." The car drew up at the door of the Hardy home, and the boys helped Miss Todd alight. They brought her into the house, and their father met them at the door, evidently surprised. "You here? How dare you come to my house? What a surprise!" No, I don't know why he's surprised. Maybe because it's a Saturday and he thought they were going to be out on the boat all afternoon, and they're suddenly home mid-afternoon. I don't know. He was evidently surprised. The logic in some of these tales, the crime logic works, but the logic in some of the storytelling just goes right over my head for some things. I'm sorry, I make fun of it, I know. But I'm not the sort of person who pretends that old books are perfect, because they're not. But modern books aren't perfect either. "A client for you, Dad," explained Frank. "We picked her up just a little while ago." He did not tell his father just how they had picked up the elderly woman. Yes, elderly. She should still be pretty wet. Nobody's offered her any dry clothes. "And is this Fenton Hardy?" asked Miss Todd. She grasped the noted detective by the hand. "I've come a long distance to see you. These fine boys of yours saved my life." "You've been in the water!" exclaimed Mr. Hardy. "No bleep, Sherlock. She's got wet clothes on. Her hair is wet. Her shoes are wet. Her skin is probably drying a little bit, but when you've been immersed and they're talking about you going under for the third time and then you get rescued, you're going to be totally, absolutely, completely saturated. And if you are going under because your clothing is such that it's, when it's wet, so much heavier than you are, that's not going to dry out quickly. Not in the time it takes to get to shore and go to the doctor and then drive in the taxi to Fenton Hardy's place. "You're wet." He called to his wife. "Laura, will you look after this lady and make her comfortable?" Miss Todd's clothing was not entirely dry, owing to the immersion in the waters of Barmet Bay. I think we're being polite here. Not entirely dry. I think her clothing would be rather saturated. It would still... The taxi driver has probably charged the boys a little extra for the fact that his seats now have salt water in them, which is not good for the leather or the springs, the steel springs. Yes. And when Mrs. Hardy appeared, she insisted on taking the guest upstairs and providing her with a complete change of garments. See, she's thoroughly saturated. Miss Todd insisted that her business could not wait, even for such an important detail as dry clothes, but the better counsel of Mrs. Hardy prevailed. Good. When Miss Todd came downstairs some time later, she was still very weak and nervous, but in a more settled frame of mind. "If you'll come to my office," suggested Fenton Hardy courteously, "I'll be glad to hear your story." Miss Todd looked around.
I had intended to keep it private, she said, but you've all been so kind to me that I'm sure it will not do harm if you all know. That is, if you would care to listen, she added, turning to Mrs. Hardy and the boys. Both Frank and Joe were very curious to know the nature of this mysterious affair that had brought Miss Todd to Bayport, and it did not require any persuasion for them to remain. Miss Todd sat down in an armchair, and after she was duly settled, began a long, rambling narrative. "It's about my brother," she said, "my twin brother, Toddham. Toddham Todd. Toddham, that's his first name. Todd, Todd. I do hope Mr. Stratemeyer had not told the ghostwriter that had to be the name of the character, that the ghostwriter came up with it themselves. And nobody decided to object. It's just so weird. Sorry. I've never heard the name Toddham as a first name. I've never heard the name Toddham. Have you? He's a very clever man, a professor. Perhaps you've heard of him, Professor Toddham Todd, Ph.D. It all started when Toddham and I went on that railway journey to visit Cousin Albert. And she speaks as she uses relations as titles. Cousin Albert is capitalized. At the time I said I had a strange feeling that something was going to happen and perhaps we'd better not go, but Toddham said I was foolish, so we went, and I was right. It turned out that I was right after all. Yes, said Mr. Hardy encouragingly, wondering what all this was leading. I was quite right, declared Miss Todd emphatically, because something did happen. There was a wreck. The train jumped off the track. It was a terrible wreck. There were 5 people killed, and it was a blessing Toddham and I weren't killed too, but we were hurt. We were badly hurt. I've never felt the same since. My nerves have never been right. As for Toddham, he had always been a nervous sort of man, and after that wreck he went all to pieces. The doctor said he would be all right after a while, that all he needed was rest and quiet, and I believed he was right, but we sued the railway for damages. Did you win the suit? Asked Mr. Hardy. It has not come to trial. The lawyers delayed everything. In the meantime, poor Toddham was acting strangely. You wouldn't think he was the same man. He was very queer. I used to wonder if the railway wreck had affected his mind. Instead of getting better, he became worse. Then one night, just before the trial was to come off, he disappeared. Disappeared? He walked out of the house one night, and from that minute to this we haven't seen hide nor hair of him, declared Evangeline Todd. We have heard of him, but he's like a will-o'-the-wisp. We have heard of him in different places, but when we come to look for him, he's gone. He has never written to us. There hasn't been any real trace of him. The shock was too much for me, and I collapsed. I haven't been well since, and not a bit well. My nerves have been completely shattered. When did your brother disappear? Asked the detective. Months ago. This happened 4 months back. Fenton Hardy frowned. 4 months ago. That makes it more difficult. If you'd come to me earlier, I would have had a better chance of helping you. Don't say you won't help me, Mr. Hardy, entreated the woman. Please don't say you won't take the case. I didn't mean it that way, said the detective kindly. I meant that the chances of tracing your brother are not as good now as there would have been 4 months ago. I'll do what I can, of course, but I'm afraid it will be a hard task. When a detective tells you that, that means his fee is going to be high. We searched for him everywhere, Mr. Hardy. I'm sure he's still alive, for we've had reports of him from different places, but I have no idea what can have happened to him. It's just possible that he has had a mental breakdown, said the detective. You say he was acting strangely after the wreck. He may be in a hospital somewhere and unable to communicate with you. I'm quite sure he didn't deliberately run away. Toddam has always been so quiet and studious, and so anxious to give no trouble to anyone. Something dreadful must have happened to him. If it weren't for hearing that he has been seen in these different places, I would believe that he is dead. As it is, I'm sure he's still alive. Perhaps we can find some trace of him, said Mr. Hardy. I'll take the case, Miss Todd, and although I can't promise to find your brother, you may be sure that I'll do the best I can. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. I knew you wouldn't refuse. I wish now I had come to you in the first place, instead of wasting so much precious time. Perhaps we can recover the lost ground. With a bit of luck, we may be able to pick up his trail. Miss Todd sank back into her chair. Oh, I hope so. I have been so worried. She clasped her hands nervously. Find him for me, Mr. Hardy, and I'll pay you well. I must know what has become of Toddam. Her face suddenly became pale. The strain of the narrative had been too much for her. She relaxed limply. Mrs. Hardy hurried forward. Get me a glass of water, Frank, she said quickly. She has fainted. How is she going to drink water if she's fainted? Water. I like these new water bottles. I'm not getting a sore arm or a sore shoulder from picking them up. And I'm not whacking my microphone. 12 pages in the next chapter. Yes, I think we can fit that one in. Chapter 5, Concerning Toddam Todd. What a name. It was quite evident that Miss Todd was in no condition to go to any of the city hotels. She needed rest and quiet more than anything else, and when she had been revived a few minutes later, Mrs. Hardy insisted that she remain in the Hardy home for a few days as a guest. Her sympathy had gone out to the distracted woman, and although at first Evangeline Todd would not consider the proposal, being afraid of imposing on their hospitality, Mr. Hardy insisted that she remain. Your story interests me very much, he said. I'll be very glad to take the case. On one condition. What condition is that? On condition that you accept our invitation to stay here for a while until you are feeling better. So Evangeline Todd was prevailed upon to stay, and Fenton Hardy at once prepared to take up the trail of the missing professor. He had no important cases in hand at the time, so he was able to spare a few days for preliminary investigation work, and he decided that his best plan was to go directly to the college town where the Todds had their home. Sometimes a professional and a stranger can pick up clues that won't fall in the way of a police detective who is in the town, he said. I'll run up there and see what I can discover. Mr. Hardy was accustomed to being called out of town suddenly, and the family were used to his abrupt departures. The detective was a man who acted quickly once he had made a decision, and Miss Todd was surprised to see him leaving immediately. No use wasting time, he said cheerfully, having paused only long enough to pack a bag with a few essentials. I'll get busy at once. Although Frank and Joe Hardy were curious to learn further details of the latest mystery on which their father was working, and in which they had taken a small part, Miss Todd had evidently suffered more from her adventure in Barmet Bay than they had at first thought. She was obliged to keep to her room over Sunday, and the lads had no chance to talk to her. As Mrs. Hardy decided that their guest should not be disturbed, wisely Mrs. Hardy wanted to keep the woman's mind off the matter of her brother's disappearance, and she knew that if the boys besieged her with questions, her state of anxiety would be only rendered worse. On Monday, when the boys returned to school, they were met at the gate by Chet Morton, heading a group of grinning chums. Chet, a plump, jovial youth equally fond of food and fun, held up a restraining hand. We would fain talk with thee, noble youths, he said. Humble varlets though we are, we would crave your indulgence for a time. You sound like Shakespeare or somebody, said Joe. Probably somebody, Chet agreed. Young masters, we have gathered here today to do honour to two brave and bright young men whom we are proud to call our chums. Perhaps, he went on in the manner of an orator, in the years to come, when we are poor and unnoticed people, we may be able to say to our grandchildren that once upon a time we went to school with the Hardy boys, that we went swimming with them, and that they often gave us rides in their motorboat. However, that is not getting to the point. What's it all about? Asked Frank. What's all this speech for? Patience, patience. Our little committee has waited patiently for your arrival, and now we wish to show you our esteem and regard. It has come to our notice that on Saturday, the 14th instant, you did bravely, heroically, and nobly perform the humane act of hauling an old lady out of the water when she had swallowed several gallons of Barmet Bay and was in grave danger of drowning. As a slight token of our appreciation, we wish you to accept these little tokens here. These little tokens. Here Chet gestured to Biff Hooper, who grinned and stepped forward with two shiny objects on an old cushion. Not so much for their intrinsic value, which is considerable, but for the spirit in which they are meant. Chet took a deep breath. I don't know whether that's all quite correct, he said, but I learned some... I don't know whether that's all quite correct, he said, but I learnt some of it from a book. Then, very gravely, he picked up the shiny objects, which proved to be impromptu medals carved from the tops of tin biscuit boxes, dangling from red ribbons, and pinned one on the chest of each of the Hardy boys. There were loud cheers and shrieks of laughter from the boys at this mock ceremony, and the Hardy boys joined in the laugh as well. However, behind all the nonsense, the lads realised that their chums were proud of them. The tin medals were embarrassing, and the boys watched for their first opportunity to take them off. Seriously, said Chet some time later when he was alone with the brothers, the fellas think he did some mighty smart work fishing that lady out of the water. The captain of the boat told people about it when the yacht docked. We couldn't very well stand by and watch her drown, said Frank. If Biff and Tony could have got there first, they'd have done the same. Sure, but the point is, you chaps got there first and saved her life. If you weren't there, Biff and Tony couldn't have done very much, for their boats aren't fast enough. Where is the lady now? Did she give you her name? Frank and Joe then told Chet about Miss Evangeline Todd and about the coincidence that her visit to Bayport had been the object of seeing Fenton Hardy. Chet was greatly interested when they told him about her search for the missing professor. A professor missing, eh? That's something new. If one of the professor's students had disappeared, there wouldn't be much mystery about it. I know one student of this high school who would like to drop out of sight for a while, until after these exams are over, at any rate. You're hopeless, laughed Frank. And just then the opening bell rang, cutting off further conversation. When the boys returned home at noon, they found that Miss Todd had recovered sufficiently to come downstairs. She seemed in much better spirits, and the rest had evidently done her a great deal of good, because she was not in the highly nervous state of the previous Saturday. I'm going to guess that there were books to read and things like that in the room, because the reality is if you're left totally on your own, because you need to spend time recovering from something and it's deemed inappropriate to talk to you about a subject because it's going to stress you more, but it's on your mind, you're going to be thinking about it unless you've got something to distract you from it. In this day and age, we use the internet, we would watch TV, listen to the radio, whatever. But back at this era, I don't think that would have been the normal thing. I'm going to guess that Mrs. Hardy made sure there were books or magazines that she could read and really pressed her to do so to keep her mind off her worry about her brother, because that would not have helped her to rest and recover if she was worrying about him. It's such a relief to know that the case is in good hands, she said. If Fenton Hardy can't find poor Toddam, I'm sure no one can, though he may turn up on his own accord, she added. We'll hope for the best, said Mrs. Hardy quietly. Dad didn't like to question you too much on Saturday, Frank remarked. He didn't want to bother you more than he could help. I'm afraid I wasn't in any condition to tell him many details. Perhaps you would... If you would tell us anything you overlooked, we might be able to help out a little too. Miss Todd was thoughtful for a moment. There were a few things about Toddam that would identify him almost anywhere, she said. For instance, he was very careless about his shoes. His shoes? asked the boys. He would not keep them laced. It was simply impossible to keep an eye on that man, and if I didn't watch him, he was just as likely as not to go out to classes in the morning with his shoelaces dragging on the ground. And he wouldn't notice them unless he tripped over them. He was very absent-minded. So he's an absent-minded professor. I have the feeling that this is going to help us identify the real Professor Todd versus someone who's pretending to be him. The laces being undone. That's a pretty good clue to go on. What did your brother look like, Miss Todd? He was tall and rather thin. His hair was white and he was clean-shaven. His eyes and his teeth were very good. Even in spite of his age and all the reading and studying, he never had to wear glasses. Oh, yes, there's something else. He had an expression he often used about as near swearing as he ever went. By jing, it was. Whenever he was excited about anything or wanted to emphasize something he said, he would always exclaim, by jing, J-I-N-G. I remember that he forgot himself in lecture one day and said that. The dean spoke to him about it, because it's, at the time, so close to swearing. It wouldn't have been considered inappropriate. By jing, remarked Frank thoughtfully. It isn't an expression one hears every day. It's the only expression I can remember that was quite characteristic of Todd'em. Miss Todd had little of further value to tell them. What about what he lectures on? What his main subject is? What his interests are? What drives him to do stuff? You know, the personality of the man? Is he shy and retiring? Is he outgoing? Is he garrulous? Does he like chatting with strangers? All of that sort of stuff. Miss Todd had little of further value to tell them, and when the Hardy boys were by themselves later on, they discussed the peculiarities of the missing professor. He forgets to tie his shoelaces, and he says, by jing, observed Joe. It should be easy enough to pick him out with a description like that. It's strange he hasn't turned up long ago. Unless he met someone who knew he was missing and who had heard of those little habits, he wouldn't be noticed. And it's just about 1,000 chances to 1 we would ever run across him. Well, we can at least make a note of it and tell Dad when he comes back. Chances are he'll never hear about those things, and Miss Todd may forget to tell him. It might help him a lot. I guess this is one mystery where we don't have much chance to help, said Frank ruefully. Still, we'll do what we can. But the Hardy boys were destined to take an even more active part in the mystery of Todd'em Todd than Fenton Hardy himself. And that's the end of the chapter. The next one is 13 pages long, which means it's going to go just past 3 o'clock, so I'll read it. Plans for a trip. Chapter 5. Vacation time came, as it always does, although the days dragged, and when the last examination was written and the Hardy boys and their chums faced the long summer holidays, the boys had more exciting concerns than the affair of Todd'em Todd. Miss Todd had left the Hardy home after profuse thanks for the hospitality the family had shown her, and had returned to the college town. Mr. Hardy, after spending a day or so there, had gone on to parts unknown, and it was assumed that he was following clues that he hoped would lead to the discovery of the missing professor. "What are you going to do now?" asked Chet on the first day of the holidays, when a number of the boys were sitting in the barn behind the Hardy home. I'm not going to read it as written, except to tell you what it was that was written. The Hardy boys were sitting in the barn back of the Hardy home. I'm sorry, it's behind the Hardy home. Back of. Out back of? Out the back of? But they're dropping extra words just to shorten it and make it not make sense. I'm sorry, that doesn't work in Kiwi accent. Behind the Hardy home. "Joe and I were figuring out a motorboat trip," said Frank. "Good idea," Tony Pritto remarked. "Where are you going?" Frank shrugged. "No place in particular. We hadn't come to that. As long as you go somewhere, it's all right with you, eh?" suggested Chet. That's about the size of it. I'd like to go on a motorboat trip myself, said Biff Hooper slowly. As a matter of fact, I know of a place to go, but I don't know whether we can reach it in a boat. Where's that? I was talking to an old sailor the other day in one of the villages down the shore, and he was telling me a story about some caves that are said to be down on the main shore. Outside Barmet Bay, I guess. The main shore? Not the state of Maine. It's written M-A-I-N and it's not capitalised. We were talking about buried treasure, and that's how he brought the matter up. He said that there were old rumours of treasure in these caves. Treasure! Exclaimed Chet, brightening up. That's our meat. So who was saying that? Oh, Biff. Biff was saying that. Of course, I'm not saying there is treasure in these caves, but the old chap said he had heard the story and he thought there might be something in it. In the caves, you mean? Said the irrepressible Chet. Sure, these caves are out on the coast, south from the mouth of Barmet Bay. There you go. It wouldn't take us very long to go down and look the place over, Frank remarked. They're not very easy to reach. I'm not sure that we can get to them by motorboat. But I believe there's a road that runs down the coast in that neighbourhood, and we might be able to get there by land. Caves where treasure might be hidden. Generally, that sort of thing means it's on the coast. Why can you not get there by motorboat? Does that mean there's great reefs and rocky shore and everything for miles and miles and miles, which means you can't get to it? That's all I can think of. Doesn't make sense, but we'll find out. Let's read. I believe there's a road that runs down the coast in that neighbourhood, and we might be able to get there by land. We have the motorbikes, Joe said promptly. I'll find out more about it from the old chap and let you know, Biff promised. Find out more about the treasure, advised Chet. Find out if it's in gold or silver, and if we have to dig for it, and if there's enough to divide up amongst the crowd of us. Well, if everybody knew that, it wouldn't be there still, would it? So far as treasure is concerned, I don't hold much stock in these stories usually, said Biff. But this old chap said that a gang of wreckers at one time lived in these caves. Wreckers, those are people who induce ships ashore onto rocks so that they can actually have the ship get wrecked, so that they can get the supplies off the ship. And that did sometimes mean killing the people who'd been on the ship if they weren't actually drowned from the ship being wrecked. Yes, Cornwall is legendary for that sort of thing. Whether it's actually real or mythological, I don't know. And the same with some of the other coastal extremities of the British Isles. I don't know about this part of New England states, though. And, you know, the eastern coastline of the US. But this old chap said that a gang of wreckers at one time lived in these caves. They had a pleasant little habit of changing the lights on the buoys along the reefs and wrecking ships. I'm guessing this is why they couldn't get there by boat. Except that their boats aren't very big, so it should still mean that they can. Doesn't make sense. Then they would rob the vessels and store the loot in the caves. Good night, exclaimed Tony. Regular pirates. I'll say they were. Of course, all this was years ago. The gang was wiped out eventually, and some of the leaders were hanged. But this old chap I was talking to said that very little of the loot was recovered. They probably got a lot less than was rumoured, too. Of course, it may have been sold or shipped away, but he believes a lot of it's still hidden in the caves. So why hasn't anybody else found it? Hasn't anyone ever hunted for it? Oh, yes, but they've never found anything. Why should we? Asked Chet. Why shouldn't we? And what does it matter if we don't? We might have some fun making the trip. Which is a good point. I think it's a good idea, approved Frank Hardy. We can take the motorcycles, run down there and poke around and then come back. Of course, I don't think we'll find any treasure, but it'll give us some sort of an objective anyway. Suits me, declared Chet. My motorbike's hereby enlisted. I can take Biff along in the sidecar. And we have our machines, said Joe. Tony can ride with one of us. Because Tony hasn't got a motorbike, obviously.
We ought to have a mighty good trip, said Frank. How long do you think we should be away, Biff? It'll take about a day and a half to reach that part of the coast, for the roads aren't very good, and then it'll take another day or so finding these caves. If you want to do any exploring, I guess we could stick around for the rest of the summer and still have lots left to do. Well, we won't stay for the rest of the summer, but about a week or 10 days should give us a good outing. That suits me, said Chet. I have other things to do in the holidays besides crawling around in caves. It was decided that the lads should inform their parents of the projected trip and make ready immediately. They planned to leave Bayport in 2 days, as they wanted a day in which to overhaul their motorcycles and get everything in readiness. Tony Preto was dubious about getting permission, as his father had been talking of putting him to work in the wholesale fruit depot for a few weeks during the summer season. When the Hardy boys went into the house to tell their mother about the trip to the caves, they found that their father had just returned. He was unpacking his bag as they entered the hall. "Hello, Dad," they greeted him. "What luck?" Fenton Hardy shook hands with his sons and returned to the bag. "Back in the old days, eh?" "Hi, Dad." Shake hands. "What kind of luck do you mean?" he asked. "In the Todd case, did you find the professor?" "No," said the detective. "I didn't find the professor." Didn't you find any trace of him at all?" "I found traces of him all right. He's still alive, which is the main thing I learned." "And yet you couldn't find him?" asked Joe. "What does he mean by traces of him that say he's still alive? Spill the beans." "I followed him through half a dozen towns and cities, but I must say he's mighty elusive. He was always about 3 jumps ahead of me." "He knew you were looking for him?" "I don't think so. He wasn't running away from me, but he keeps on the move and he jumps about from one place to another without any rhyme or reason, so he was hard to follow. I finally lost track of him." "That's tough. Where did you lose the trail?" "At a little place called Claymore, about 50 miles south of here." "He had been seen there last week, but he went away and no one knew where. I could find him, so I gave up the search and came home." "Have you dropped the case?" Fenton Hardy laughed. "Did you ever hear of me dropping a case before it was cleared up in one way or another?" "No," admitted Frank, "but I thought you may have considered it a waste of time." "It was a waste of time to keep following him about and never catching up with him. I decided to try another angle. Oh, we'll pick up Todd yet. Joe and I have some information for you, but perhaps you know it already. Miss Todd gave us a few facts about her brother's appearance." "I have all that. I have a pretty good description of him, and I managed to get hold of a photograph at the college." "Did you hear about his shoelaces?" asked Joe excitedly. "His shoelaces?" "Miss Todd said her brother was mighty absent-minded, and he quite often forgot to tie up his shoelaces." Mr. Hardy was interested. "I didn't hear that one," he said. "It might be valuable. I'll make a note of it. A clue like that might mean a great deal in a case like this." "And what about Bai Jing?" asked Frank. "Bai Jing?" "It's an expression he uses. He never swears, but once in a while he says Bai Jing if he is excited." "That's something new too." "In all the information I picked up about Todd, I didn't hear anything about that expression or about the shoelaces, and they are 2 of the most important clues I could ask, because they are unique identifiers." The boys were gratified that they had gained this much information for their father's benefit. They knew that although Fenton Hardy had given up the direct search for the missing professor, he would never abandon the case until there was a definite solution one way or the other. "Have you found why he disappeared from home?" asked Joe. "I imagine he simply lost his memory," said Mr. Hardy. "At the present time, from what information I could pick up, he has no idea that his real name is Todd. His memory is completely gone, and he isn't able to remember anything of his past life. Probably if he met his sister again or some old acquaintance, it might all come back to him. He's wandering around trying to find out who he is and where he comes from." "Poor old chap," said the boys sympathetically. "He evidently had some money on his person when he disappeared, because he hasn't been in want, and the reason it was so hard to follow him was because he didn't stay in any one town more than a day or two, just long enough to know that it wasn't his own town and that he could learn nothing about himself there. Then he would go on to the next place,
but he'll turn up, I'm sure. I have a number of places being watched where he's likely to put in an appearance sometime, and I'll be notified at once. In the meantime, promised Frank, we'll keep our eyes peeled for him, but we'll not be able to help much for a couple of weeks yet. Why? We're going on a motorbike jaunt down the coast to look over some caves. Hidden treasure? Asked their father, his eyes twinkling. Perhaps. I hope you make $1 million, laughed Mr. Hardy. I'll try to find Todd'em Todd before you come back. And that's the end of the chapter. So, there we go. That's it for today's reading, but don't go away yet. The next chapter, so you know, a teaser for you, is chapter 6, The Missing Motorcycle. So that's so you want to come back and hear more. Next time I'm reading, I will hopefully have some plushy friends with me as part of my birthday anniversary celebration. That's about all I'm doing. Might have some fancy drinks, but we'll be reading. I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary as far as I know. I might refresh my selection of headbands. I'm going to write that on my list too. Headbands and ears. There you go. I have 3 things on my list to get sorted before I'm reading next. And I look forward to seeing you then. Don't forget, next time, because it's going to be my streamiversary, you'll be able to use the party hat emote, which becomes available to you because it's my anniversary, I think. Something like that. I don't know how it works anymore. Too much stuff going on in real life for me to be able to even remember that was coming up until I saw it in my Twitch notifications today. That's just the way it works. Anyway, so look after yourselves. Make sure you stay hydrated. Be kind to yourself, okay? And happy reading.